Good morning, everybody. Have you ever noticed how hard it is for human beings to confess their sins? You'll see this in all these strategies. We will either, blame shift and point a finger at somebody else, like Adam and Eve, the woman made me do it, the serpent made me do it. Or we'll minimize it, we'll deny it, we'll rationalize it. There are all kinds of strategies we employ. But one of the things I love about the psalmist, at least most of the time, not all the time because he's a human being too, but most of the time you see the psalmist kind of step up and say, I did it, I'm guilty, I sinned. It's like the old song, it's me, O Lord, standing in the need of confession. Well, we come to Psalm 38 today, and that's what we're going to see. This is a penitential lament. So it's got the characteristics of a lament, which we've looked at before, but it also has this penitential thread that runs through it. Now, remember, laments, it's probably not the most satisfying term we said, because there's more to a lament than simply lamenting, although there is a lot of that. But there's also these expressions of trust, and you're going to see that in this one as well. But the nature of the complaints revolves around his sin and the impact that it's having on him. And so you're going to see this flow of thought as it moves from maybe a sentence of expressing his acknowledgement of God, his trust in God, and then a couple paragraphs of lamenting and complaining. Let me show you what I mean, because this is going to go back and forth. First of all, don't miss the lament language. Let me just give you a quick summary. He says, I'm overwhelmed. It's too heavy to bear. It's loathsome. I've been brought low. I'm mourning. I'm searing pain. I'm utterly crushed. There's anguish in my heart. But remember, there's more to a lament than lamenting. Now, let me just summarize, though, the kind of complaint sections. There are three of them. The first one is verses 2 through 8, and you could call it his complaining about his physical suffering. And I'll just read one or two verses that are representative. Verse 3, because of your wrath there is no health in my body. There is no soundness in my bones because of my sin. Again in verse 5, my wounds fester and are loathsome because of my sinful folly. Notice, first of all, the reference to his health and to his body and to what the suffering he's going through, and its connection, he says, because of my sin and because of my sinful folly. Then here's a second cluster in verses 10 through 14, and now it's going to move from the physical suffering to his emotional loneliness. Verse 11 would be a good representative verse here. My friends and my companions avoid me because of my wounds, and neighbors stay far away. Now, oftentimes physical suffering ends up in emotional loneliness. You're seeing that right now with the COVID-19 crisis as, spouses go to the hospital and their spouses cannot come to visit them because of the pandemic, and the emotional loneliness and stress is sometimes even greater than the physical suffering. Now there's a third clustering of lament here, and that's verses 16 through 20, in which he moves now into interpersonal struggles and strife. Verses 19 and 20 would be representative. Many have become my enemies without cause. Those who hate me without reason are numerous. Those who repay my good with evil lodge accusations against me. So you can see this combination of physical suffering, emotional loneliness, interpersonal strife, and struggle with people. But now notice how, against the backdrop of this lamenting, there are these every so often little punctuations of trust in God. It begins in verse 1 by saying, Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. These are exactly the same words, word for word, as Psalm 6, verse 1, which then goes on to say, have mercy on me. And so it's pretty clear here that this language is reminiscent of someone who's turning to God in every situation of life, because he realizes that his suffering and his struggle is related to his relationship with God. Notice down in verse 9, all my longings lie open before you, Lord. My sighing is not hidden from you. It's a recognition that God is omniscient, that he is sovereign, that he sees our sin, he sees the condition of our heart. It's not like our prayers are actually informing God of anything he doesn't know, but rather it's an acknowledgement that he's the only place we can go to find comfort. You see a third little prayer in verse 15 where he said, Lord, I wait for you. You will answer, Lord my God. Notice again just the expression of trust in the midst of suffering and pain, and that's really the big lesson that they want us to take away, that the psalmist wants us to take away. But one final one in verses 21 and 22. He says, Lord, do not forsake me. Do not be far from me, my God. Come quickly to help me, my Lord and my Savior. The psalmist here is acknowledging that in spite of life's struggle and its pain, that Yahweh alone saves, Yahweh alone can bring comfort. Now I hope as we go through these morning devotionals that it is deepening and nurturing your prayer life, and that you are actually learning to pray along with the psalmist, because that is exactly the purpose of this book.